The young and the restless spoilers. Cole Howard's world had narrowed to the relentless ticking of a clock he knew was running out. Every morning, he awoke to the sterile hum of hospital machinery and the faint, rhythmic beeping that marked each precious heartbeat. His body, once strong and steadfast, now betrayed him in every tremor, every labored breath. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the corridors lay empty and the city's bustle felt miles away, he allowed himself to fully acknowledge the truth he had fought so hard to deny. His illness was terminal, and no treatment, no miracle, could stem the tide of time any longer. He bore the weight of this knowledge not for himself but for the two women he loved most, Victoria and their daughter Claire. Knowing that with each passing day he remained by their side, he risked stealing from them the lives they deserved. The thought of Victoria sacrificing her career, her passions, and her very spirit to care for him in his final days filled him with a grief deeper than any physical pain. It was this grief that steeled his resolve. He would leave them, not in shame or fear, but so that they might reclaim the future he could no longer share. He would disappear from Genoa City, vanish into the silence of solitude, and spare them the agony of watching him wither away. Yet drawing up the courage to enact this plan required a cruel clarity, a willingness to become the villain in the story so that Victoria and Claire could emerge as survivors free of regret. At the heart of Cole's decision lay the extraordinary bond he shared with Victoria. From the moment their eyes first met in a burst of laughter and chance, their connection had blossomed into something rare and unbreakable. He witnessed her stand unwaveringly at his bedside, guiding a small hand through intravenous tubes, whispering promises of love and hope even as she bore the brunt of his suffering. He saw how Claire, wide-eyed and innocent, thrust tiny drawings into his palm and insisted that her daddy needed to fight harder, not knowing the extent of his despair. In those moments, Cole's heart both swelled with love and clove itself in two. Victoria had paused her ascent in the corporate world, her days consumed by doctors' appointments, research articles, and sleepless nights. Claire's laughter, once echoing through the halls of their home, had become tinged with worry, as the brightness of childhood dimmed in step with her father's declining health. He recognized that by staying, he would anchor them to a life of perpetual caregiving and grief, and he could not bear to see the optimism he had helped nurture suffocated by the pall of his illness. And so, despite the ache of bidding farewell to the woman who was his constant, he concluded that love demanded sacrifice, even if that sacrifice would paint him in the harshest light. Under the cloak of night, Cole crafted a farewell letter that would both shatter and liberate. His pen scratched across the paper with trembling determination as he poured every truth he dared utter and every emotion he struggled to contain. He wrote of the shame he felt for leaving Victoria to grieve, yet he insisted that his departure was the greatest gift he could offer, the freedom to rebuild without the specter of his mortality. He spoke of Claire's bright future, urging Victoria to seize every opportunity the world still held for her and their daughter. He confessed his fear that he could not bear the sight of her tears, that he wished for a final memory of Victoria's radiant laughter untainted by sorrow. Then, with a final flourish, he pledged that he would not vanish silently into oblivion but would ensure that his exit would leave no room for doubt. This was not a deathbed confession but a deliberate act of love in reverse, designed to ignite Victoria's anger and propel her forward with the ferocity of vengeance rather than paralyze her with regret. He envisioned her fury as a more powerful catalyst than her sorrow, a force to drive her towards self-discovery and renewal. Once the letter was sealed, he left it on Victoria's pillow at dawn, next to her favorite novel, and slipped away from the hospital wings before the sun's first rays could betray his flight. In the days that followed, Genoa City awoke to whispers of Cole Howard's sudden absence. Victoria found the letter in the hush of early morning, her heart pounding as she recognized his handwriting. Her hands shook as she read the words that cut deeper than any diagnosis. His refusal to let her life be defined by his death. Fury exploded within her, a blaze that scorched the grief she had braced herself to face. She cursed the cowardice that allowed him to flee, and she tore the letter in two, scattering fragments across the pillow. Yet even in her rage, a spark of gratitude flickered, gratitude for the man who, in his final act, had chosen to give her a second chance at joy. Claire, too young to parse the nuance, felt only betrayal at first. She searched hospitals and neighbors' homes, her small voice ringing with confusion and hurt. But as days turned to weeks without word, Victoria harnessed her anger, channeling it into work, into boardroom battles, and into the fierce determination to secure a life of stability and success for her daughter. Rumors swirled of a private memorial service, but Victoria refused to attend any gathering that felt like a funeral. Instead, she walked forward under the weight of her fury, determined to prove that Cole's last wish, her newfound freedom, would not be in vain. The absence of Cole Howard left an indelible mark on Genoa City's social tapestry. In the corridors of Newman Enterprises, conversations hushed when Victoria's name was mentioned. Claire retreated into books and painting, her childhood resilience tested by the mystery of her father's goodbye. And somewhere beyond the city limits, Cole watched from the edges, invisible yet eternally tethered to the lives he'd left behind. He observed Victoria's ascent, her reputation as a formidable executive unspoiled by tragedy, her devotion to Claire shining brighter in the absence of his paternal guidance. He took solace in glimpses of their occasional successes, the mother and daughter forging ahead into realms he could no longer reach. Though his body weakened, his soul found strange comfort in knowing that his final act had kindled a fire in Victoria's spirit, a fire that he hoped would burn so fiercely that neither love nor loss could ever dim it. In the end, Cole Howard's greatest masterpiece was not his business acumen or his charm but the deliberate shaping of a legacy in which his absence became the catalyst for their survival and growth. In the silent expanse where he waited, Cole nurtured one last hope. That one day Victoria might look back and understand that sometimes the deepest love is expressed not in presence but in the harrowing courage to let go. Cole Howard awoke before dawn with the familiar ache in his chest that no amount of medication could soothe, and he lay perfectly still in the half-lit room, listening to the muted chorus of life beyond his hospital window. The distant honk of a car horn, the faint murmur of voices on the corridor, the urgent footsteps of a nurse making her rounds. Each sound reminded him that time was slipping away, that every moment he lingered robbed Victoria and Claire of precious chances to breathe in a life unshadowed by his fading heartbeat. He closed his eyes and summoned the courage that had once carried him through the fiercest corporate battles, the bravest rescue attempts, the proudest victories as a husband and father, and he felt the same steely resolve take shape. It was time to make the hardest choice of his life. He reached across the bedside table to a worn leather journal, its pages filled with half-finished notes, half-formed plans, and scribbled recollections of laughter and tears, and he drew out a single crisp sheet of stationery. As he began to write, his hand moved with deliberate precision, no jagged lines of anguish, no tremulous apologies, but with the clarity of a man determined to sculpt the best possible legacy from the tragedy of his demise. He addressed Victoria first, praising her resilience, her fierce intellect, and the way she had transformed every corridor of the hospital into a sanctuary of hope for him. He thanked her for every whispered word of encouragement, every hand held through the terror of each diagnosis, and he asked her forgiveness for the heartbreak he was about to inflict. Then he turned to his daughter. "Dear Claire," he wrote, "you are the wildflower of this world, bright, bold, and breathtaking in your innocence. And it is for your joy that I must choose absence over suffering." He reminded her of the game nights, the bedtime stories, the secret tickle fights that left her squealing with delight, and he urged her never to betray the family who had given her a home, to stand strong in her role as the daughter he cherished, to shield Victoria's heart from unnecessary pain and to remember always that love sometimes asks for the highest sacrifice. He confessed that he knew Claire's true parentage, that he understood the dangerous tide that might one day bring Jordan, her birth mother, back into their lives, and that the secrets he carried were a shield as much as a burden. He explained that he had made legal preparations, and knew will bequeathing guardianship and every remaining asset to Victoria, the engagement of a trusted attorney who would enforce his final wishes, and a carefully compiled dossier of evidence. Medical records, photographs, emails, bank statements, that would guard Claire's place in this family against any claim Jordan might attempt. He begged Claire to trust in Victoria's unwavering devotion and to know that although he would no longer walk beside them, his spirit would linger in every memory, every lesson, every echo of his laughter. When the letter was complete, he folded it with a gentleness that belied the storm of emotion within him, and he tucked it beneath Victoria's pillow alongside the dog-eared copy of her favorite novel, a silent testament that love endures even in departure. He dressed quickly in the charcoal suit he had reserved for special occasions and slipped out into the pre-dawn hush of the hospital corridors, a solitary figure resolved to vanish without fanfare, to let his absence speak more loudly than any tear could. Later that morning, the news of Cole Howard's disappearance rippled through Genoa City with the force of a tidal wave. Victoria arrived at work under the fluorescent lights of Newman Enterprises, her carefully applied mascara already tinged by exhaustion, to find a spread of concerned colleagues and hushed conversations. She forced a polite smile, but her heart hammered in her chest with a familiar dread. At home, Claire discovered her father's leather journal open on the coffee table, and inside, the blank page at the end of the day's entry held only a single word, goodbye. Panic spiked in her chest as she searched the journal for any explanation, and when she retrieved the letter from her mother's pillow that evening, she felt her world collapse and then ignite all at once. The words on the page, though penned in her father's steady hand, felt like a knife twisting in her gut. He was alive, he had chosen to leave them, and in that stark realization, Claire's sorrow was eclipsed by anger. The betrayal burned like acid, and in her fury she pressed the torn fragments of his letter into her clenched fists, vowing never to forgive. But even as she raged, a flicker of understanding kindled in her mind. This act was born of love, however tortured. She saw the legal documents outlined, filed and witnessed as he promised, ensuring Victoria's guardianship and Claire's security. She recalled the attorney he mentioned, a friend of the family named Susan Grant, who had comforted them after his diagnosis. She recognized the depth of his planning and the lengths he had gone to spare them endless nights of watching him fade. So, beneath her anger lay a reluctant gratitude. And as the days passed, Victoria, galvanized by righteous indignation, channeled her grief into action. She convened with Susan, pored over Cole's meticulously organized records, and affirmed control over every asset he'd left behind. She refused to relinquish the office space he would have used for his thriving counseling practice, instead launching a foundation in his name to support families facing terminal illness, determined to transform his final lesson into a beacon of hope. Claire, meanwhile, buried herself in schoolwork and art, letting her fury fuel her creativity and her ambition. She painted vast canvases of stormy seas and solitary lighthouses, each brushstroke a testament to her father's sacrifice and her promise to live without regret. Yet in the quiet moments before dusk, when the sky burned with soft gold and the city exhaled its frenetic pace, Victoria and Claire felt the weight of Cole's absence most keenly. They'd never received more news of Jordan, an ambiguous remark in a distant relative's letter, a whisper that she might be alive somewhere, watching. The specter of Jordan's potential return loomed like a thunderhead on the horizon, threatening to drown them in legal battles and emotional upheaval. It was in those moments that Victoria would retreat to the solitude of her study, surrounded by stacks of files and photographs that Cole had assembled, pictures of Claire's birth, of late-night laughter under twinkling Christmas lights, of the day they adopted their scruffy rescue dog. Those images were her arsenal against the unknown, proof of a bond stronger than any DNA test. And sometimes, when Claire fell asleep at night, Victoria would leave a single rose on her bedside table, a promise that no matter what storms might come, they would face them together, fortified by the foundation Cole had laid. Cole himself drifted through the margins of their lives, a silent guardian. Somewhere beyond the city, he watched from the vantage of anonymity as his final act took shape. He found solace in Victoria's impassioned speeches at the Foundation's inaugural gala and in Claire's triumphant presentation of her artwork at a youth exhibit. He drew strength from the sight of mother and daughter laughing again, unburdened by his illness, and he felt his love for them swell even from afar. In the hush of the night, he listened for echoes of his name in Claire's whispered goodnights, and he imagined her fierce determination to protect their family against any threat, including Jordan's possible return. He knew that the secret of Claire's parentage might one day surface, that Jordan's reappearance could fracture the fragile peace they'd built. But he also understood that the love and unity he had fostered in Victoria and Claire would prove a stronger fortress than any court order or bloodline claim. In the end, Cole Howard's masterpiece was not the fortune he amassed nor the battles he won in the boardroom, but the unbreakable legacy of love and resilience he sculpted with his final, sacrificial choice. As the days turned into weeks and the city resumed its merciless rhythm, the memory of his absence lingered like a beacon, a reminder that love sometimes demands the greatest courage of all, the courage to vanish, so that others may truly live.